So from a teaching perspective, it's critical to realize that different learners learn differently. So we try to appeal to these different kinds of learning methods. That is the one who listens well, obviously. So in that line, we have videos that are made so that they're able to listen and see. Then we have those that obviously that are more hands-on. So there's quite a big practical component to what we do. And then they also learn in that process. And then there's obviously also those that have to do. So they learn more by just doing practical things. So we try to include that as well in the learning mix, if you will, so that they're able to, so that all these different kinds of learners are able to, adapt and come to terms with the material and learn better. And that's obviously supplemented by free and online courses and materials that we make available to them. Yeah.
Firstly, for me, it's important to know who my students are. Knowing student demographics. These are students. This is where they come from. Know their experiences. This is what they bring. And from there to then teach in a way that is student-centered, a way that places the student at the center of what I'm doing as a lecturer. So the content should speak to the students. The curriculum itself should speak to the students. It must be relevant, it must be applicable, and it must be engaging for students. It must not just be content for the sake of content, teaching because I have to teach. It must be teaching that which is relevant for a 21st century graduate, for a Nelson Mandela University graduate, for a graduate from a South African university. That must be central in my teaching. It must be applicable for the students to say, from here, how do they use this? Can they use it? Will they use it? And the student must be keen on doing so. So it must really be interesting for the students across the board. So it boils down to a content that to a curriculum and content that tries to cater to everyone by looking at the demographics and the experiences, and also what the market, the job market that is, requires of a Nelson Mandela University graduate.
From that perspective, sometimes the students actually fear you, and they see you as this person that knows everything. But once you start talking to them, and what I like to do is I like to have one-on-one discussions with some of the students to understand where they're from, what their interests are, what they do. And this is done by means of random testing after the class. So yes, they do feel nervous a little bit, and sometimes they are, a bit on edge. But the more we do that, the more we build a personal relationship with these students. So that's one of the things that one needs to overcome, so that the learner is able to feel comfortable and safe in the learning environment.
When it comes to power and privilege in the classroom, between lecturer and student, I think it goes without saying, considering the title lecturer said to be holding more power than perhaps the title student. These elements are there, and they're also present student to student. Students from differing genders, students from differing races, students from different backgrounds. These factors are constantly at play in this power and privilege dynamic. So yes, there is this disparity in power. And how do I view it? I think my perspective towards it is one that says we should look at leveling the playing field. I think once the playing field or the engagement field is more level, we can engage more constructively in conversations, in ideas, in thought. And so I was to confront it, and also confront it knowing that it is a difficult path to navigate, because these power dynamics are existent and at times difficult to avoid. At time one does not hold the power to, and there's power play again, one doesn't hold the power to break down the power. So yes, we must acknowledge that it's a difficult path to navigate or path to traverse, but also in its difficulty, attempt to approach it.
So from a power and privilege perspective, what, not so much in the material, but what we try and do is we try and include other individuals from outside, from other industry partners and people who are professionals, and as well as masters and PhD students, so that the learner is able to understand that, look, it's not just the lecturer that has the knowledge, and there are other people also that are privy to certain areas of knowledge, if you will. And this makes them more comfortable with the learning process, but also gives them a touch of reality, in a sense that they now understand what they're learning can be applied in other fields as well. Peer-to-peer learning is a big thing for me personally. And I think that's why when we group the students together and we have a master's or PhD student mentoring them, they're able to feel a bit more comfortable in the learning space and ask questions they wouldn't necessarily ask to the lecturer. So that's one of the major things. Then the other thing is obviously real world situations and consultants, as well as industry professionals, coming in and teaching them the applicability and case studies of what they're doing. So there you can see, you normally find they also feel more comfortable. But many of the learners, actually, what we do, we try to throw at them real world situations or real world data for long-term projects. And you find that it's not necessarily the smartest one or the one who talks the most in class or the one who's most engaged in class that shines in those situations. So those kind of combinations of tools bring out, the best in everybody, if you will.
In managing power and privilege imbalances in learning and teaching spaces, we must be open to engaging. We must open learning and teaching spaces to engagement. There must be spaces that are open for diverse views, where we discuss this very privilege, and in our discussions attempt to find common ground on which we can understand and find each other. And for me, I guess an advantage is the fact that I am young. I'm young. I would say recently completed my undergraduate degree, which kind of places me in a place where I still am in touch with the powers and privilege imbalances that I experienced as a student, and many of which still prevail today. And part of my approach in learning and teaching spaces is to try and level it by looking at how I would have preferred to engage, and engaging with students to say, what are your views? What are your preferences? How do we go about? How do we engage? How do we find each other?